Okay, so this is a clue of the electrical nature of emotion. Emotion is a name for energy in motion between frequencies. Physics, unfortunately, has almost no language for wattage or power moving between frequencies. No language other than scalar or torsional or heterodyne chirp. So because physics had so little way to describe what happens when energy moves between frequencies, emotion has been a mystery. But the glandular skill to grab a hold of field effects moving between frequencies is how gravity is made. The question was about Hulga Clark's book, The Cure for All Cancers, in which Hulga Clark, who's a wonderful healer, concludes that what happens is petroleum derivatives, ketones, the fumes of all kinds of paint and gas and those sorts of things, and outgassing of plastics, those kinds of things, are a food for the viral and bacteria parallels to cancer. So in effect, what happens is you create cancer by having all this petroleum junk and plastics and around you. And I believe that Hulga is right, but I believe that her reasoning is wrong, actually. Specifically, remember when Louis Pasteur said, "Oh, there's a bug in there. It's called a bacteria. Let's shoot it." That's called Louis Pasteur, right? So according to Louis Pasteur, a bug inside your body is something you got to shoot. Okay? That's welcome to the AMA, American Medical Association, right? Let's declare war on the bugs in your body. Well, cancer and AIDS are highly correlated to the presence of virus and bacteria. She's referring to a somatid cycle. Remember Gaston Nasson's Galileo, the microscope? In Chris Bird's work, they actually saw that these bacteria have a life cycle. And you can literally see it electrically. You see this pod cocoon, and then it mutates into another form and another form. And it's called a somatid cycle. And so you're mapping, this is how a virus goes through its cycle of a cold, for example. And when you map the various stages of the migration of this, what is obviously a parasite, you get a map of disease. I would like to add one thing to Hulga Clark here, and Louis Pasteur. And that is, you learn most about a body by studying its parasites. And in most cases, the parasite is doing you a favor. Right? And the key is to understanding the favor the parasite is doing for you. For example, supposing we thought the medium-grade reptiles, Yahweh and the Dracos, as parasites were doing us a favor, right? How would we learn what favor they were doing? It's simple. If you eat dead food, or if you eat a dead idea, you're going to need parasites to eat the death out of you, right? The same way a forest, the tree doesn't get a parasite until it's dying, in general. And then when it is dying, the parasite helps it to die quickly. What a relief, right? So in effect, the choice to have something that did not have its own inner fire is a creator of parasites. Well, you need to understand this. Think about a vampire who dies quickly in sunlight. Why does a vampire die quickly in sunlight? Anybody know the physics? The physics of why a vampire dies quickly in sunlight is because low-grade DNA cannot withstand the presence of implosion. So if you got fire in your heart, you have no problem with parasites. Okay? But if you don't have fire in your heart, then in fact, it's called you're beginning to die. And you're going to need parasites. Because parasites accelerate the process of dying, which helps you practice the Groundhog Day business for dying correctly. Right? So in effect, I'm not saying that you should invite parasites, but I am suggesting that you look at a long-term implication of the very concept parasite. Now that we can electrically define life force, we can define what is its opposite, which is the failure to have fire inside. So if you just think about any people that you know that have a problem with parasites, are they people who have totally lost touch with their bliss and passion? Often. When the Russian soldiers arrived in Berlin, conquering at the end of the war, they had been living in a hovel for so long, a cave basically, that they took the light bulbs from the ceiling and the faucets from the wall and took it home to the cave and shoved it in the wall and thought they'd have light and water. Yeah, it's a true story. Now that's equivalent to Andrija Puharich building a watch he called a pulsar that generates the Schumann resonance. It's the same exact logic, and it's sick. And here's why it's sick. Okay? It's sick because the low frequencies, for example, of the Schumann resonance are the carrier wave. It's not the information. It's only the carrier wave for the bloodstream of God. You see, these devices that create low-frequency field effects mistake one thing, and we studied this in psychotronics. If you take a piece of aluminum foil on the ceiling and floor and take a $2 oscillator and stick about 7.8 cycles per second into it at low wattage, euphoria goes through the room. Bob Beck does it by taking a pencil with a metal eraser, rubbing it in his hair to charge it statically. And a wave of euphoria goes through the room. You can feel it. It's palpable, right? What's happening? Each living biological cell in the room is feeling the capacitive charge wave that says, I found the modem to phase lock my baud rate for the handshaking necessary to make a phone call to God. E.T. phone home, right? So each living cell says, I found the wavelength, thank God. But what happens next? They say, I plugged my modem in, it don't work. How come it don't work? Because the low frequency was only the carrier wave for the high frequencies. See, the electromagnetic continuum, it's called a unified field, goes from 0 cycles per second to infinite cycles per second. And at 0 cycles per second, you're at the mouth of the snake Ouroboros, infinitely wide. And the electrical description of that infinitely long wave is called totally still and everywhere at once. Now, if you go down the electromagnetic continuum from 0 cycles per second through the speed of light and ultraviolet and then radio waves, and now you're at infinite cycles per second. That's the tail of the snake. It's infinitely tiny. And the electrical description of that wave at infinite cycles per second is totally still and everywhere at once. Do you get it? The serpent ate its tail. The Ouroboros, right? So the reason biology uses really low frequencies is because they're a modulator, a carrier wave for the very high frequencies. So by making a Tesla watch at 8 cycles per second, to temporarily zap your body, you create the same frustration as a baby with a pacifier, right? Now, at a deeper level, this is not a condemnation of all those gizmos, but I would suggest to you, you might want to use one simple evaluator question. The simple evaluator question for every time somebody says, here's my gizmo, buy it and be healed. Okay? There's a billion different gizmos somebody's going to try to hand you and say, here's my gizmo, buy it and be healed. And you need to ask only one simple question. What is the pure principle and how will it empower me? Okay? So the grander water, for example, they don't know what the pure principle is, so they can't tell you. Every time you buy some gizmo to heal you where you do not know the pure principle, it's exactly like saying, here, buy my gizmo and join the Borgs. It is a privilege to be assimilated. I am 7 of 9. It is futile to resist. Okay? Every time you use a device whereby the principle of the device does not empower you to do it for yourself from the inside out, or you can't be nourished by the pure principle, you're a little closer to becoming the Borg, literally. And that's how you lose your soul. So the point of these devices is that every single one of them says, well, gee, there was some recipe to get magnetism through the speed of light. Some people call it tachyon. Buy my tachyon bead and go through the speed of light. You don't need your heart. Only you don't need my tachyon bead, right? So everybody has a little bit of a taste of this principle of how to go through the speed of light, because everybody knows that they're going to be dead if they don't get through the speed of light. People are at least intelligent enough to know that. And if you can't make it for yourself, buy my gizmo, right? So the long-term solution is you can use the gizmo just so long as you learn that it helps you learn to do it for yourself. But if it doesn't help you learn to do it for yourself, then in fact it's not self-empowering. Self-empowerment